Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to my little corner of YouTube. Um, just ringing in the new year with a new couple of chapters. Trying to keep it consistent with every couple of weeks or so. For all I know, I could just be talking to the void. Because I don't actually keep track of how many people. Well, I'd like to say I'm lying. Actually, I am lying. I'm lying. I keep track. So, those 8 to 15 of you that consistently listen to my videos, thank you. I really appreciate you. Hopefully someday we'll get some more people just filtering in on the back end. But if we don't, it's fine. Alrighty. So it is January 1st, 2026, which is crazy to say. Make sure to stay hydrated and let's continue our journey. We are on chapter 9 of our book, Circle of Magic, Sandry's book. And last time I believe it was still more slice of life, which is what a lot of this book is, if I'm being honest, if I remember correctly. Anyway, chapter 9. Lark pointed to the slate on the wall. Chores. Do a good job today. There won't be time for it tomorrow. Deja, after you scrub the privy, ask Rosethorn for herbs to sweeten the air. Briar, don't neglect corners when you dust and sweep. Everyone got to work. Even the dedicates, swept out their workrooms and cleaned the altar tucked in the corner between Sandry's room and the front door. Once they were finished, they vanished into their workrooms. Pouring hot water into the tub where dishes awaited Sandry, Triss saw that Briar scratched at the floor with a broom. No, she called. Dust first. Then sweep. That way you get the dust you knocked to the floor. He looked at the broom and at the dust cloth. You do? Triss went to Briar. Here! She ran the cloth over a table, carefully doing the corners. Aunt Uriel, who had kept her for 3 years, always checked her dusting, making her do it all over again if she missed a spot. Do flat surfaces this way. When the rag gets dirty, shake it out the window. Now there's a shelf. The shelf that she pointed to held a few small objects. Briar nervously poked at the spaces between them with his cloth. No! Cried Triss. You have to pick them up and dust them and do the shelf under them. Honestly, you'd think you'd never dusted in your life. I haven't. Who'd guess that people did things to keep their homes clean, or that they'd want clean homes in the first place, he thought. Me neither, called Sandry from the wash tub. Triss pushed her spectacles up on her nose. But we had servants, explained the other girl. Briar shrugged. I didn't have a house. Maybe my dam had a room, but she died years ago. The thief lord wasn't what you'd call a bear for housekeeping. Milla bless us, Triss said. Well then, watch me. Carefully, she lifted the vase that Briar had tried to work around and dusted it. See? And before you put it back, she briskly ran the cloth over the spot where the vase had been, then returned it to its former position. Handing the cloth to the boy, she pointed to the dog statuette that was next to the shelf. Now you. Once he was dusting well enough to suit her, she went to the dishes that Sandry had washed and began to rinse and dry them. Shaking her head, she muttered to the other girl, No house, as well as live amongst savages. We had fine tunnels underground, Briar remarked. His back was to them as he dusted, so he couldn't see Triss's glare. If you didn't mind rats, my mate Slug, he trained a rat to bite the toes of merchant folk. You should have seen him jump. Smart rat, eh? I don't think it's funny, Tris told Sandry, who giggled helplessly. After that, Tris kept her opinions about Briar's upbringing to herself. The boy grinned and set about dusting the window ledges. That morning, Nico held their class in meditation at Discipline. Before they started, Lark and Rosethorn did an odd thing. They walked a circle around the cottage, Lark going clockwise, Rosethorn counterclockwise. Lark carried a ball of white yarn, letting it unroll until the yarn reached all the way around the house. At the front door, where she had started, she tied the ends together so that it made a closed circle. Rosethorn carried a basket of dried herbs with her and trickled a stream of them in her wake, as she walked her own circle. When she finished, the dried leaves and stems formed another O that encased the cottage. Only then did she and Lark join everyone else in the main room. "Why did you do that?" Sandry wanted to know. "It keeps the magic from leaking as we meditate," replied Nico. Rosethorn muttered, "Or from leaking out." "Everyone," Nico said, frowning at her, "breathe and count. 1, 2, 3. The dedicates sat on the floor and performed the breathing exercise with the rest of them. Today, it seemed easier for the children to bring their minds to a pinpoint of concentration. Nico looked genuinely pleased when they finished and told them that they had made real progress. Going outside, Lark untied her yarn and rolled it up. Rosethorn followed, scuffing her foot through the line of herbs in several places. She broke her circle. During midday, Lark gave Deja a scarlet armband and a scarlet headband to show that she was a traitor in mourning. Watching Deja put them on, Sandry looked at her black clothes. Her own mourning was not suited to housework or to carding and spinning wool. Even after she'd used Lark's wool drawing charm, excuse me, her overdress last night still had a fuzzy white coat. She finished washing the midday dishes, then climbed the stairs. Her boxes were neatly stacked in the attic corner. Opening them, she found her old, everyday summer gowns, a rose muslin and 2 blue ones, 2 brown linen dresses, and undergowns in white or undyed cotton and linen. These were the things she had worn last year, plain clothes for traveling in. For a moment she hugged them, breathing in the sweet pea sachet that Prissy had always tucked into her boxes. Wiping a hand over her watering eyes, "So much dust up here," she muttered. She stripped off her black cambric overgown. The rose muslin went on in its place, and she sighed with relief. Light as the cambric had been, this was much more comfortable. Stay hydrated, everyone. Once she was finished with her things, she looked around. The doors to Triss's and Deja's rooms were open. Where had they gone? She didn't think they'd left the cottage. Turning, she saw a ladder that led through an open trapdoor in the roof. She climbed it and found the other 2 girls seated on the thatch. "It's still wet from the storm, isn't it?" she inquired. Triss patted the canvas that she had brought to sit on. "Though if it keeps this hot, it'll be dry by tomorrow." Lying back, she linked her hands behind her neck. Deja stood by the chimney, one arm around it as if it were a mast. Shading her eyes, she inspected Winding Circle. "Actually, this is a nice view," she remarked. "This whole place is built like a bowl. It's almost the same as the amphitheater of heroes in Zakdin Hatar." Sandry made a face. Triss moved over, offering her a place on the canvas. The noble took it. "Only, there's no buildings or trees there," Deja went on. Quietly, Sandry told her, "They're isn't an amphitheater anymore either. After the smallpox epidemic, they took all the bodies into it and burned the whole thing. It was only made of wood. Hurriedly, Triss drew a God circle on her chest. "That's horrible," she remarked with a shudder. Sandry tugged a straw out of the thatch. "When Nico and I left, the king was saying he'd rebuild it in marble." "It should look nice," Deja said with approval. "Whiter black marble, did he say?" Sandry's gloom lifted. "I forgot to ask," she replied with a tiny smile. "I still wasn't talking very much then." "Speaking of you talking," Deja came to share the canvas with them, "that novice won't forget you pulled rank on him in front of Crane and everyone. Just like the girls from your old dormitory won't forget." Triss opened a sleepy gray eye. "She did odd things in her old dormitory too?" "She took up for me," explained the traitor. "Remind me to write them a note saying that I apologize," Sandry replied, tossing her braids back over her shoulders. Deja shook her head. "Why get in the middle? Briar stole that tree, and it was costly. Minimum I ever saw a Shotgun priced for was 10 silver astrals." Triss clicked her tongue against her teeth, impressed. "I had to help," Sandry replied flatly. "He's one of us." Deja blinked. "Is there an us?" Sandry looked surprised. "Certainly. Didn't that thing this morning convince you?" "I try not to let fights convince me of anything." Deja lay back. "And I wasn't in it. Not really," objected Triss. "Oh, stop!" Sandry gave her a friendly push. "Why did you go help if you didn't care if they got him?" Triss blushed scarlet and held her tongue, not wanting to say that she'd half hoped to see him in real trouble. Should she tell the others that she was at the foot of the ladder now, listening? The warm air that rose through the trapdoor from the house below carried the sound of his breathing to her sensitive ears. "You're getting ahead of yourself," Deja said, yawning. "I don't want to be an us with a bunch of cacks." "Or I with a traitor and a noble and a thief," remarked Triss sleepily. "You'll see," retorted Sandry. "I know what I'm talking about." From atop the hub, the bell tolled the end of the rest period. Triss heard Briar tiptoe out of the attic as the girls got to their feet. Folding her canvas, she thought, "At least he'll have the decency to pretend he didn't hear any of that." "What are you and Nico doing today?" asked Sandry, descending the ladder. "Here, pass the cloth to me." Triss obeyed. "We're going down to the cove," she explained, climbing into the attic once Sandry had gotten off the ladder. "He mentioned something about learning tides, and I get to practice my meditations more." "Good luck," Sandry replied. "Thanks." Her voice was very dry. "I'll probably need it." Fretting, Briar watched as Rosethorn lifted his tree from the counter in her workroom. She cupped its small, round pot in her hands. Dirt-stained fingers probed the openings in the bottom, testing each bump in the glaze. "Why are there holes?" he asked, unable to keep still. "Won't the dirt fall out?" "They let water drain through it as it does in the ground. You put screens over the holes to keep dirt in. Now hush." Closing her eyes, Rosethorn ran her fingers over the earth in the pot, then over the surface twists that were part of the shotgun's roots. Briar's nose itched. The scent in that room of black earth, herbs, and flowers, of rain on hot stones, filled his ears and nose, tickling his eyes, pressing on his skin. Opening his mouth, he breathed deep to taste it. Something within him replied to its call, adding moss, briars, and young twining plants to the feeling in the air. Fingers tweaked his nose. "Ow!" He rubbed the abused spot. "Don't do that," Rosethorn said, not unkindly. You've gotten them all excited. Gotten who? He looked to see if his shotgun was all right. To his surprise, there were fresh green buds on some twigs. Glancing around, he saw new leaves on the plants by the windows. You know better, Rosethorn told the miniature tree. You know very well you can't keep most of those. You talk like it understands, Briar complained. Rosethorn's eyes laughed at him. It does understand. After 146 years, it knows more about how to grow and not grow than we do. Taking his hand, she put it on the shotgun's trunk. A tickling like fire shot through him, making him wish he could roll in gravel and scratch like a dog. He yelped and pulled away. The tickling faded. You felt unrestrained growth, the dark side of the green man, Rosethorn said. If you let that go, the whole plant is weakened. It's in such a hurry to throw out new twigs that it doesn't take the time to build them strong. We have to cut off the most of the new growth, then clip a few branches and roots. What's left will be hardier and longer lived. He grabbed the pot and hugged it to his chest. You're gonna cut it? The tree protested. He was bending its twigs. Briar held it away from him. Cutting shapes a shotgun. It scratches the itches. Put it on the counter. He did as she ordered, warily. More than anything else, it needs a new pot. Even Crane should have seen this one as no good. At least that made sense. A bigger one, right? Asked Briar, scratching his itching knuckles. That one's too small for a tree. No, a flatter, broader one. Gently, he touched one of the branches he'd bent, stroking the wood. But it won't have room to grow. It's not supposed to grow. Not like you mean. It's how you fit a mature tree of a century or more into a pot in the first place, She thought for a moment, arms crossed, foot tapping. Briar put his left palm on the tree's trunk and closed his eyes. He could feel something inside the living wood, like soft fire. He prodded it towards the cold spots. That were the shotgun's withered branches, where its fire was somehow blocked. The fire tried to obey, but the dead areas were too strong. I need you to go to the potter's, Rosethorn said, and you're sweating. Are you all right? Dazed, Briar let go of the shotgun and wiped his forehead on his arm. I'm fine, I was just thinking. Huh. She looked unconvinced. Pointing to a stack of slates and a box of white lumps beside them, she ordered. 2 slates and a piece of chalk. Briar got them. Using the chalk, Rosethorn sketched a long triangle with holes at each end, then a short rectangle, both on one slate. He guessed that these were for the dish that she needed, though he couldn't read the writing she put next to each drawing. As she wrote on the other slate, he rested his fingers on the shotgun's trunk again. Before he'd itched with raw new growth. Next, he'd felt its pulse. This time, he found patience. The slow and steady wait over years in sun and cloud. Eyes closed, he breathed deep of the heavy green smell that filled the workroom once again. His nerves steadied. You keep your shotgun outdoors, but close to you. A shelf on your front window will do nicely. Rosethorn gave him the slates. This one, for delicate watergrass at the potter's. This is for delicate lancewood at carpenter's. Wait for their reply, then come back. I'm not trimming this shotgun. You are. Briar gulped and fled. All afternoon, Sandry labored to spin thread. Carefully, she nursed her spindle, usually remembering to twirl it again before it spun in the wrong direction, and undid all her work. Her attention, as much as she could, she could spare from the spindle, was locked on her fingers as she tried to feed only small amounts of the wool to the thread. There was just one more thing she wanted to do, if only to see whether she had dreamed her last days in the cellar or not. Taking a deep breath, she tried to think of only calling light into her thread. The turning of the spindle, like a flat top at the end of a string, drew her eye, making her drowsy. She imagined bits pulling free of the sun's rays, coming to tangle in the wool, twisting to form a thread that was both fiber and light. Here was a glowing patch. Another bit of light winked from the work just coming from her fingers. It was time to stop and wind nearly 2 feet of gleaming thread onto the shaft. When the triumph at her success flooded her mind, the light in her thread flared, blinding her. The wool in her rolag, uneven in the middle, parted. The thread dropped through her fingers. Down fell the spindle, whirling counterclockwise, undoing all her work. Every bit of light in it went dark. Lark, who was putting a new web of thread on her floor loom, saw the girl cover her face in her hands. "You need a rest," she told Sandry. "Go outside. Look at the colors you see, and the flowers, and the people. It will go better if you relax." "I feel so stupid." Sandry collected what had once been nearly 2 feet of light thread. Now it was pieces of carded wool that unspun themselves where they lay. "I know children spin well. Why can't I?" "Perhaps children practice for longer than a week before they expect to have proper thread," suggested Lark, "and they don't try to work magic at the same time." "But I did the magic once before," cried the girl. "When you had nothing else to think about. The hammering we heard earlier didn't help my concentration either. You've been at this too long. Anyway, it's important to rest." Lark smiled. "Go out, Sandry. The wool can't run away." The girl obeyed, walking into the slab of rock that served the cottage as a doorstep. Her ears rang, her muscles felt weak and unused. Glumly, she looked for the source of all the hammering, so close to Lark's workroom. She didn't have to look far. There was a shelf of bright new wood on Briar's windowsill. Briar himself walked around the corner of the house, his stolen tree in his hands. Carefully, lovingly, he placed it on the shelf. Somehow, the shotgun seemed different from the plant he'd stolen earlier. Curious, Sandry got to her feet. Briar flinched. He hadn't seen her there, and turned his face away as she came over to look at his prize. "Hello," Sandry told him. The shotgun sported a new pot, a wide, shallow tray with a cool green finish. There were fresh cuts where branches had been clipped off and painted over with tan liquid. The twigs all looked too short, and it took a minute for her to see why. The buds had been removed. "What did you do to it?" When he turned, she saw tear tracks in his golden brown cheeks. "Why were you crying?" Digging in her pocket, she produced one of her black-bordered handkerchiefs. "I'm not crying," he growled, and swiped the back of his hand under one eye. Startled, he realized wetness was there. "Pruning hurt us," he muttered. "Take it." Sandry thrust the handkerchief under his nose, thinking, "At least it doesn't pain me when the thread goes to pieces." "Was it a bad hurt? Like when someone kicks you, or a good one, like when a healer sets a broken bone?" He shifted the tree slightly, wanting it to receive a perfect mix of sun and shade. "Never had a healer." He scoured his cheeks with the fine white cloth. I guess it was a good hurt, like when I lost my baby teeth." He offered the handkerchief back to her, and saw the stains and dirt his fingers had left. "It's a mess. I'm sorry." "Keep it," Sandry replied. "The Hataran lady who bought my mourning clothes got so many handkerchiefs. I thought she expected me to cry for years. Can I touch the tree? He glanced at her, then at his shotgun. Don't hurt it or scare it. Gently, she ran a finger along the trunk. 2 of the larger branches were loosely wrapped in metal spirals. What's this wire for? It helps the tree grow in the shape that you want, Rosethorn said. He scuffed a bare foot. He'd misplaced his uncomfortable new shoes somewhere on the ground. Listen, thank you for earlier. The words were hard to say. You didn't have to do that. Of course I did. Maybe you'll do something for me one day. Don't hold your breath, he advised, sounding more like his normal self. She grinned at him. Don't worry, I won't. Last piece of the day, Frostpine grunted, hammering a hot bar of iron. Kirill, I need that stripped now. Deja watched as the apprentice put on heavy leather gloves, picked up tongs, and drew the wire from the fire. She could see that his grip on the cherry red metal was awkward as he turned from the forge, and nearly said so. Instead, she bit her tongue. Most people Kirill's age would not like advice from an 11-year-old girl. The novice caught his foot and stumbled. His tongs dropped from his grip. She didn't think. She grabbed the hot iron before it struck the ground. Lifting it with a relieved sigh, she offered it to Kirill. The novice backed up, eyes wide in horror. The forge stopped his retreat. Kirill? Deja? Asked Frostpine. What's wrong? Deja still held the red-hot metal out to the novice, though she had begun to shake. Just so her own kin would look at her for handling work of Luxia, for spending a whole afternoon in a Luxia's shop. Gently, Frostpine reached over her shoulder and took the hot bar from her grip. Kirill ran outside. Frostpine placed the iron on the rim of the forge. Show me your hands. Deja obeyed. He turned them palm up in his own. They were unmarked. Will you get the iron from my anvil? He asked, folding her fingers over her palms and giving them a squeeze. Put it beside this piece. Don't stick them back in the fire. Get 2 fresh iron bars from that box and put them in till a third of the bar is on the coals. Frostpine? She whispered, not sure of what she wanted to say. He'll be all right, the smith told her. These big northern lads are just a bit high-strung. He went outside. Deja put the iron on the fire, then stood in the doorway to cool herself off. She heard Frostpine whispering, I warned you, when you came to me, that you would see odd things. A girl who holds red-hot metal in her hands? That's more than just odd. I don't understand why you're upset. I do the same thing all the time. You're a great mage. Perhaps the greatest smith mage in the world. I always assumed you learned it after years of study. Deja stepped away, not wanting to eavesdrop any more. Once out of hearing, she regarded her hands. Dark brown with tan and brown palms. They were striped with heavy calluses from hard labor that went with being part of third ship Kasubo. Going to the forge, she hesitated, then wrapped her hands around the red tip of the iron bar she had caught. It felt warm, but pleasantly so. Now, Frostpine said, coming back inside. She looked at his hands. He'd taken the hot iron from her. He wore no gloves. Now that she thought of it, he hadn't worn them all afternoon. Where were we? Supper was a quiet meal. Only Nico, Lark, and Rosethorn talked. The 4 children were exhausted from their day, half asleep before sunset. We'll visit the baths now. Lark and I will clean up after we return, Rosethorn said when they finished. You children, go to bed early. You look done up. Why the change? Asked Sandry, yawning. Once a month, we go to the Summersea market, explained Lark. We'll sell goods from Winding Circle's booth. Sandry clapped her hands. Triss sat upright, and Deja smiled. Summersea was one of the Pebblesea's great ports. The market would have all sorts of interesting things. It's too soon for me to leave my Shawcon, protested Briar. I should stay with it. What if that delegate Crane steals it back? He wouldn't dare, replied Rosethorn. And it's no good hovering over a Shawcon. They take their time. Lark stood. Everyone, collect your bathing gear. From the look of things, we'll have to make sure you don't fall asleep and drown. The children braced to obey. Chapter 10. Up an hour before dawn the next day, they slept through most of the ride, cushioned in the cart by cloth, yarn, and bottles and crocks of liquid and ointments. By the time the sun was fully above the horizon, they were rolling through the mire, the city slums, part of a line of wagons, people, horses, and flocks on their way to market. When they passed through the city wall between the mire and Summersea proper, Briar sighed with relief. He was not sure how he felt, looking at a slum that was so much like the one where he grew up. The immense market square was jammed with merchants and shoppers. When they reached their booth, Rosethorn wasted no time in putting everyone to work setting their wares on the shelves and table. Once the cart was empty, but for a canvas-wrapped bolt of cloth, Lark drove off. Nico, who had accompanied them on horseback, followed her. Briar and Deja, who had brought her staff, guarded the booth. Sandry and Triss showed goods, looked up prices, and wrapped the items that were sold. Rosethorn talked to favored customers while handling the cash box. It was a busy morning, with hardly a moment of quiet. All of them ate their midday standing up. Soon after that, Lark returned. We can let the children go, can't we, Rosie? You and I will mind things. Rosethorn eyed the youngsters. Promise to stay together? And out of trouble? They nodded. She pointed to the Guildhall clock. Return by 3. Taking coins from her belt purse, she handed them out. Here's 5 copper crescents each. Don't buy anything illegal. Now scat. Come on, said Briar when Sandry hesitated. Before she changes her mind, Deja added. She grabbed one of Sandry's arms, Briar the other, and they dragged her away. Triss brought up the rear. Their first stop was a sweet shop, where they spent a crescent apiece. Their second was at the market fountain to wash their sticky hands, and after that they wandered among the stalls. Sandry found a wooden drop spindle painted dark green and bought it. Triss located a cellar of used books and dived into his crates, examining each volume. The others drifted away. Finding a coppermonger's stall on the outer rim of the square, Deja stopped to admire his finely worked serving dishes. Briar struck up a conversation with 2 ragged boys. Finding a spot where people wouldn't bump her, Sandry eyed the buildings around the square nearby. Summersea Guildhall, Provost's Hall, Trader's Hall. The Guildhall in particular was very fine, with statues of craftsmen tucked in niches around the first story. She was about to go have a closer look when a dog's yelp, followed by human laughter, caught her attention. Looking around, she saw an alley where 6 boys, fairly well dressed, were bent over something. "Stop that!" she cried, running over. She seized a boy. "How dare you!" Her captive, a big youth in a green tunic, slammed her, knocking her onto a pile of refuse. Scrambling to her feet, Sandry hit another lad. He tried to kick her, but managed somehow to tangle her foot in her skirt. Grabbing his ankle, she twisted, dumping him on his back. She seized his neighbor, trying to drag him away from the others. That boy caught one of her braids and yanked hard. With a scream that was as much rage as pain, Sandry bit his arm. He yelled and punched her in the stomach. Hearing a commotion, Deja looked around. Briar was still talking to the ragged boys. Triss was bargaining for a book. Where was Sandry? Bullies! She heard a familiar voice cry. Oafs! Torturing an animal! Get out of here! Yelled someone at the square's edge. A small figure went flying from a group of boys to hit a wall. Deja gripped her staff tightly and ran to Sandry's aid. The boy, who had thrown Sandry against the wall, wasn't done. As he raised a fist to her, something hard walloped him across the shoulders. He spun around to face a black girl, nearly his own height, equipped with a trader's staff. He swung at her. From the ground, Sandry kicked at the backs of his knees, while Deja rammed the head of her staff into his midriff. He went down hard, rolling into a clump of horse manure. Behind you! Sandry cried to her friend. Deja thanked the luck gods that her uncles insisted she learned a few staff tricks very well. Putting the weapon between her arm and side, she drove the smooth wood back until it hit someone hard. He yelped. She turned and banged him on the side of the neck, making him retreat. There were 3 more town boys wading in. Ho-ho! It's a tumble, one of Briar's new acquaintances remarked. Town girls, too. Not bad for town girls. That one's a traitor, noted the other street rat. Traitor staff, anyways. Briar turned to look. The town girl was Sandry. What was he supposed to do? Rescue her and Deja? Because they lived together? Did that make 'em his gang? He sighed. He did owe Sandry for yesterday. In Dead Man's District, debts always had to be paid, sooner before later. Besides, it looked like a good fight against the plump merchant boys. With a nod to the street rats, he ran to help the girls. He took the enemy by surprise, kicking Green Tunic between the legs from behind. Another boy swung on him. Briar ducked. Gripping the enemy's arm, he twisted it up behind him and shoved him into a boy who was trying to rise from a manure pile. Deja whacked a boy with her staff. Sandry, on the ground, yanked at the breeches of a boy who waited to get at Briar, pulling them around his knees. When he stumbled and fell, she wriggled by. There, at the mouth of the alley, was the shivering, blood-streaked ball of fur that had cried in pain. Grabbing the puppy, she hugged it to her. "Town lads!" cried Green Tunic, who seemed to be their leader. "Town lads to me! None of that!" Briar rammed him in the stomach, knocking the air from the larger boy's lungs. "You do your own fighting!" At the bookseller's, Triss tucked her purchase into a pocket and looked for the others. When she spotted them, she began to tremble. Fights meant pain and getting in trouble, and she hated getting hurt. Deja was in the thick of it, laying about with her staff like a woman beating carpets she didn't like. Briar darted from one enemy to the next, doing quick things that made them bellow and curse. There was Sandry, lobbing a brown mass that she scooped from the gutter into the boy's face. More youths ran by, intent on the fight. They outnumbered Triss's housemates, and most of them were bigger as well. She suddenly had an image of the embroidered wall hanging that Sandry had given her so casually. It was a beautiful thing. In twilight, she found the needlework birds almost seemed alive. If she helped, the boys would hurt her. That had happened to her before. Frantic, she looked around for a constable or any other adult who might break things up. Instead, the alley where the fight drew her eyes. At its far end, she could see the blue-gray waters of Summersea Harbor. She wasn't sure what happened next. Her mind broke free of panic like a kite that had caught the wind. Air bore her up as it had the first time that she had tried meditation and carried her to the harbor. Drawing her mind close, concentrating on a small patch of water, she drew it up with an invisible bucket. She would bring it to the town boys to cool them off. A rude hand grabbed her shoulder and whipped her around, breaking her concentration. "Out of my way!" snapped a youth that shoved her aside. Confused, Triss shook her head and turned until she could see the harbor and alley again. On the docks, in full view, a waterspout, a water cyclone, twirled like a very thin top. The boy had spun her, and she had spun her seawater. "Uh-oh," she whispered. When it was 10 feet tall, the waterspout jumped free of the dock. Wobbling, it advanced down the alley, pulling crates, garbage, and gutter muck into itself as it came. "Excuse me." Triss ran towards the fight. "I think you should stop." No one heard. The waterspout caught up with a pair of boys. Grabbing them, it spit them against the alley walls. A third boy turned and was seized head first. He rose nearly 7 feet before the spout dumped him. Deja, Briar, and Sandry couldn't see the alley. They were around the corner. In the main square, where a youth raised his hands to block Deja's staff. She switched its angle and knocked his feet from under him. Briar twisted a boy's nose, then joined Deja to guard Sandry and the pup. Carefully, the three of them backed up. 3 town youths followed. A watery cyclone sprang from the alley. The town boys, not knowing what came at them from the rear, saw shock in the foe's eyes. "That's the oldest trick there is," Green Tunic jeered. He sported the beginnings of a black eye. His partner, with 2 swollen lips, laughed harshly. Only the third youth turned to look, then ran. The spout gulped the other 2, spun them rapidly a few times, then spat them onto the cobbles of the square. Watching all this, Triss shook with terror. She was in real trouble this time. There was no bolt of lightning to strike and vanish. Already it had pummeled some boys. Now it advanced on her housemates. She ought to start running and not stop until she reached Nemorn. The puppy escaped Sandry's hold and ran at the waterspout, yapping and snarling. Sandry dived for him and missed. Until now, Triss's only friends were animals. "No, no!" Running up, she thrust herself in front of her creation before it could seize the dog. "Stop right now! I command it! Please?" The spout halted, pulling in on itself. Triss stared at it, forbidding it to move. Sweat rolled down her cheeks and back. Now what could she do? The spout shifted to her right. The moment she saw the scoured white cobbles where it had been, she said grimly, "Oh, no, you don't!" Inhaling, she reached toward her creation with her mind. She instantly felt invisible ties that stretched between her and this water and garbage monster. Wrapping her mind around those ties, Triss gripped them hard like reins and tugged the waterspout until it returned to its original position. "I'll get Lark or Rosethorn." Deja thrust her staff through Briar's hands. "Here, in case someone else gets ideas." She backed up, then ran around the waterspout, giving it a wide berth. Its upper half bent out of line, trying to follow her. "Stop it!" cried Triss. This was starting to hurt. She could feel needles of pain in her head and neck. What would happen when she lost control? Sandry drew close, scooping up the dog. She wrapped her free mucky hand around Triss's. Briar gripped the redhead's shoulder. Triss felt stronger for their nearness. Taking a breath, she let it out and forbade the waterspout to go anywhere. It shrank, then lengthened, fighting. Triss held firm. The spout whirled faster, then spat out the trash that had collected in the alley. A slab of wood banged Trish on the forehead. She yowled and clapped a hand to the gash, feeling blood spill over her fingers. Briar and Sandry braced her. You gotta hold it, Briar cried as the spout muttered to itself. Come on, merchant girl. This is no time to worry about an ouch. Hissing, the spout tore at the cobbles, throwing rock splinters into the air. Triss's hold on it broke as all three of them covered their eyes. With a roar of triumph, the waterspout turned on the market. Enough! A familiar voice said. Deja, Lark, and Rosethorn had arrived to block the spout's path. Lark held up a drop spindle, one that already carried blue yarn. Her fingers twitched. The spindle whirled left, against the proper twist. She let it slip down, her eyes fixed on the waterspout as the thread opened up. The water cyclone's motion slowed, then reversed. It stretched and collapsed, dropping into a puddle that washed away from Lark. Halting the spindle, Lark wound her unspun wool around one hand. With the fall of her creation, Triss felt the ground lurch. Her bones felt like water trickling into her shoes. She sagged, and Briar caught her. Rosethorn glared at them. You were told to stay out of trouble. It wasn't so bad. Briar put a hand over an eye that was rapidly going black. Nobody was killed. They were torturing this dog. Sandry was still red with fury. It's just a puppy, and they were hurting it. Come on. Rosethorn grabbed Deja and Sandry and headed back into the market, towing them with her. Lark and Briar supported the wobbly Triss. If we hurry, Rosethorn explained, we might get out of the city with no one the wiser. The cart with the placid cob that drew it stood beside the booth. Can't believe no one nicked it, Briar said, awed. Never mind that. Start packing, Rosethorn ordered. Lark and Briar put Triss in the cart first, then their goods. That was a fast job. Almost everything had been sold. The other children clambered into the cart after that. Deja, holding the dog as Sandry got settled, heard a roar and looked around. A crowd was approaching. Rosethorn, trouble. Both delegates turned and saw what she meant. So much for leaving before someone makes a fuss, Lark murmured. You'll answer for what you've done, cried a wealthy-looking man. A woman called, You have killed my boy! Sandry rose, twitching her skirt away as Briar tried to pull her back down. Your boy hurt a helpless animal, she cried, eyes blazing. Shame on him! Quiet, Rosethorn said out of the corner of her mouth. The square's torn up. Who's to pay for that? The speaker, a man in the knee-length tunic worn by Hatarans, halted before them. And there's penalty taxes for brawling in the marketplace. There was no warning posted for a big magical working. A woman drew close, a battered green tunic under her arm. Plus, there's a healer's fee for my son. A fine thing when children can't play while their folks are at market. He deserved a worse thrashing than he got. Sandry snatched the puppy from Deja and held it up. Here's what he and his friends were playing at. I'd be ashamed to own up to such a son. Now both Deja and Briar were trying to make her sit. Sandry yanked free. Only a brute has fun hurting animals to... Shut up, Sandry, please! Everyone stared at the cart, startled by the agonized cry. Triss fought to sit up. Her voice was harsh as a raven's. She croaked, Isn't it bad enough? Leave it! The pup whimpered and thrust his nose into the crook of Sandry's arm. With a sigh, the girl sat down. But only for you, she murmured to him. Digging a handkerchief from her pocket, she tried to clean his bleeding cuts. Maybe we need a truth-sayer, Rosethorn suggested. Question the boys and our charges to get the whole story. I'm sure Master Nico would act as truth-sayer. 2 men rode out of the lane between the stalls, followed by soldiers in the brown leather jerkins, blue shirts, and breeches of the Provost Guard. "That is part of your skills, isn't it, Nico?" Duke Vedris asked his companion. The Duke was nearly as plainly dressed as his soldiers, in a plain wine-red shirt, leather breeches, and leather jerkin studded with metal rings. A heavy gold ring gleamed in one of his ears. All around them, adults and children bowed deep, saying, "Your Grace." Briar looked at Deja, then Sandry. "Who's the bag?" "Duke Vedris?" Sandry replied, as Deja glanced at her, startled. "The ruler of Emmeline." "I often work as a truth-sayer, Your Grace," Nico told the Duke. "If it will simplify things, I can do so here." He rode over until he could lean down and press a hand briefly to Triss's cheek. She grabbed his fingers and hung on. "Your Grace," cried Green Tunic's mother, "my boy was attacked with magic. Look at him." "Look at our sons," someone else shouted. "They too were attacked." "One of them called up a waterspout," said a wealthy-looking man in the leggings and long coat tunic of the traders. "What if it had turned on ships? It nearly struck the market. You can see where it dug cobbles from the street." Sandry passed the dog to Briar and stood with her hands folded neatly in front of her. "Your Grace, may I have leave to speak?" Her voice, polite and clear, rang through the air. If no one could have seen her torn and muddied clothes, they might have thought she was a queen in her throne room. "It is my right." The Duke leaned on his saddle horn. "As one accused, you may speak, Lady Sanderline Fautorin." His voice was soft, but clear. "Proceed." "A noble?" asked someone, clearly surprised. "You never said she was a lady," Green Tunic's mother accused. "She bit me, Ma, and she's dressed like normal folk." Sandry waited until everyone was quiet. "Your Grace, my friends and I were visiting the market when I heard an animal cry." Her small face was pale and set. She kept her chin up. "6 boys were herding it in an alley back there," she pointed. "If you assign blame for the fight, give it to me, please. I attacked them. My friends came to help me, just as the boys' friends came to help them. And I still think they were very, very wrong to harm a helpless animal." "Did you inflict all these injuries, Lady Sanderline?" Her uncle's voice was stern, but the corner of his mouth quivered. Deja rose, leaning on her staff. "Some of that was me, Your Grace." The trader who had spoken glanced at her. "Changshi," he muttered. Sandry glared at him. He met her furious eyes once, then looked away. Ashamed, Deja bit the inside of her cheek, then went on. "Lady Sandry is Sati, a true friend. They knocked her down, and I went after them." "Don't be greedy," said Briar, getting to his feet. He passed the dog to Sandry. "Some of these poor sniffers' ouches are mine, your lordship, sir." "But this is a quarrel of children," objected the Duke, looking with confusion at the townspeople. "There was magic," called the trader. "A waterspout attacked the boys." "It was an accident." Triss lurched to her feet. I meant to dump water on them, and only water." She broke off, crimson, then swallowed, and went on. I lifted it out of the sea, and somebody spun me around." She wiped her sweaty face on a sleeve. "When I looked again, the water was spinning. I couldn't... It got away from me." The Duke straightened, his eyes now cold. The chatter going on under the main discussion stopped. Everyone watched Vedris V. "2 cases are before me," he said that clear, quiet voice. In the matter of injuries done to these youths, the healer's bill shall come to me, to be paid by funds held in trust for these young people. But those bills must be for legitimate wounds, and they must be sworn to before a truth-sayer. That'll stop the fakers, Briar muttered in Deja's ear. She nodded. The Duke folded his hands on his saddle horn. There is also the matter of cruelty to an animal. Deja and Briar saw people's eyes widen. The law is plain. Here in Emmeline, where the living circle is honored, he nodded to Lark and Rosethorn, who bowed, we no more harm animals for sport than we do human being. The fine, for those who have forgotten, is 20 silver astrals. Those who wish repayment for the healer's fees will tell the truth-sayer if they were liable for damage to the animal. If they are, the fine for that must be paid first. All parties will pay the truth-sayer's fee. For a moment, no one made a sound. 20 silver astrals was 3 months' income for a poor man, a month's income for a craftsman. Truth-sayers were even more expensive than the fine. The woman, who had been eager to proclaim Green Tunic's innocent, was first to reply. We need no truth-sayer or healer, she told the Duke, bobbing a curtsy. She gripped her son by one ear and dragged him away. Other youths and their families thought the better of involving truth-sayers and left as well. To those who remained, some merchants, a handful of traders, and a group from Whining Circle, the Duke said, penalties for unlicensed use of magic are high. This must also be addressed. Heads nodded everywhere. Your Grace, if I may, Nico said. Tristana did not know she is a mage. The law does make allowance for the accidents caused by young mages without proper teaching. Poppycock! Yelled a baker in a flowery apron. How could she not know? This was a ship killer, not a milk curdling in its churn. If she's ignorant of it, why is she with Lark and Rosethorn? A woman snapped. Everyone knows the mage-born are placed in their care. Briar, Sandry, and Deja looked at each other, startled. So that's why nobody nicked the cart and horse, Briar muttered. My kinfolk told me I was crazy, Triss cried, her voice crackling. The tester said I had no magic, and they got rid of me. Lark climbed into the back of the wagon and drew Triss close. She's exhausted, Lark told the Duke. She needs food, and she needs to go to bed. If you mean to punish her, may we wait until she knows what's happening? People left, shaking their heads. A sick girl wasn't nearly as worrisome as a mage who deliberately used her magic for harm. Are you satisfied? The Duke asked the three who stayed. The baker, a man with a goldsmith's badge on his hat, and the trader who called Deja Tranchi. Until we hear of another such incident, said the goldsmith, she is a danger to everyone as she is. And if I confine her to Winding Circle until Master Nico says she has control over her power? The Duke wanted to know. Is that agreeable? If they leave the city as soon as possible, I will be satisfied, replied the baker. The goldsmith nodded. The trader said nothing, only turned and walked away. Deja watched him go, her hand tightening on her staff until her knuckles were white. The Duke looked the children over. What of that animal? He asked Sandry. Rosethorn started to protest and sighed. The dog stays with us, she said. There, you heard that? Sandry asked her new friend. You belong to us now. The pup whimpered and licked her face. Instead of leaving the city immediately and getting caught in the aftermarket jam of horses and carts, they accepted the Duke's offer of supper at a nearby eating house and a guard to accompany them home. Throughout the meal, Lark concentrated on Triss, cajoling the exhausted girl into eating. Once their bellies were full, the other children were allowed to bathe their new pet in the tiny yard behind the eating house. Rosethorn anointed his cuts with sharp-smelling balm. "You four get to train this fierce wolf-like creature to take his business out of doors," she told them as she worked, "and clean up after him, and stop him from chewing everything in sight." When the dog snapped at her touch on a particularly ugly wound, she gripped him gently by the muzzle. "Enough," she said. "I don't like dogs any more than I like children." Sheepish, the dog wagged his tail and whined at her. He didn't snap again. As Sandry and Deja took the cleaned-up dog out to show Nico, Lark, and the Duke, Briar helped Rosethorn to gather her medicines. "I'm no mage," he said abruptly. "Nonsense," was the tart reply. "You're as much a mage as I am. It's just that your magic, the girls' is too, if it comes to that, shows itself in unusual ways." He put a hand on her arm. "Nico was wrong. I'm no mage." Rosethorn looked meaningfully at the hand on her sleeve until he withdrew it, a blush staining his gold-brown cheeks. "It's no accident that Nico was at your sentencing. He had a premonition of a boy with the green magic in him. I knew he was right when I heard my bean plants welcome you. You got them all excited, my buck. They wanted to throw out seed pods a month early. I had to be stern with them." "That ain't magic," he protested. "Of course it is, and important magic at that. The most important, in my way of thinking. You don't need to share that with Lark or Nico." "I'm a thief," he protested. "I bet you had a lot of plants like moss and mushrooms in whatever hole you lived in," she said, dark eyes sharp. "I bet strange things happened to you in rich men's gardens." The boy hung his head, rubbing a thumb over the deep scars in his palm. Rosethorn touched the hand. Her fingertips found each large, dimpled pock left by the vine whose name he had taken. "They grow big thorn briars to protect the tops of garden walls," she remarked. "That one must have loved you to leave such a deep scar." "With mates like that plant, I don't need constables," he mumbled. Something cool poured into the old wounds and up his arm, scented with turning leaves and wet stone. It was a thing he'd smelled in her shop the day they'd worked on the shotgun. Looking into her face, he saw the glint of green and gold in her eyes and felt the pull of life that flowed through her stocky frame. The kind of power that could sink tendrils into rock and split it open given time. "Magic," he whispered. "Go tell Nico it's time to leave," she ordered. "We need to be home before the Earth's Temple midnight worship." Once they returned to the cart, Triss was bundled up in blankets fetched from the guards' barracks. She went to sleep almost immediately. The other 3 children made themselves comfortable among the empty sacks as Rosethorn took the reins. Lark rode double with Nico for the moment. Behind the cart, they were talking quietly. The Duke and his soldiers came as well, the squad breaking in 2, so that 5 guards marched ahead of the cart, 5 behind. The Duke rode beside the cart, talking to Rosethorn about the summer crops. Sandry put the pup down, smiling as he tried to steady himself against the cart's lurch. Clumsily, he tottered over to each of them, even the sleeping Triss, and gave them a good sniff. "He probably has fleas," Briar remarked. The pup wagged his tail. "He likes you," Deja said tiredly. "No accounting for taste." "Can we call him Little Bear?" asked Sandry. "He looks like a bear. When he's standing, his feet stick out in that flat bear way." "Enough of this we," snapped Briar. "Just because we had a tumble, it don't turn us into mates. What happened back there don't mean a thing." "Touchy," retorted Deja, throwing up her hands. I'm sorry. They've got us in the same cart. Deja put a hand on her arm. Sandry put a hand on her arm. It's too hot to fight, Deja. The puppy whined at Briar. You don't know these girls yet, Briar told him. They'd drive a tortoise to frenzy. Did you know, Sandry asked, about magic? He went still, staring at her. After a moment, he looked away. No, he whispered. Sandry tugged first on her left braid, then on her right. I sort of did. Back in Hatar, after my parents died. She quietly told them about the hidden room, back when smallpox had ravaged Hatar, and a mob had killed the only person who knew where she was. I didn't think the light was real for a long time, she told them. It's only been in the last 2 days that I thought maybe I was wrong. We aren't allowed to talk to Luxia, people who make things, Deja replied softly. I was kept away from Smith's. I never guessed. Kirill acted so odd. You aren't making a word of sense, Briar growled. Deja took a deep breath and explained what had taken place when Frostpine's apprentice dropped a piece of red-hot iron. She looked at her hands. It felt like my friend, and Kirill was scared of me. Briar whistled softly. What about the redhead? He asked, pointing at Triss. The redhead will keep her story to herself, replied Triss coldly, without opening her eyes. And she'll be happy if you keep your neb out of her business. Rolling over, she turned her back to them. Sweet as ever, muttered Briar. He tugged a few empty sacks around to make a nest for himself, curled up and closed his eyes. In trader talk, Deja muttered, I told you, to Sandry. She's plain mean. The other girl shook her head. Triss could growl and snap all she liked. During their brawl, when the waterspout had tried to attack Deja, Triss had clearly been terrified and had dealt with her own creation in spite of her fear to keep it from hurting the trader. To Sandry, that act counted more than anything that a worn-out Triss might say. At the city gates, Lark climbed into the back of the cart with the children and settled herself for a nap. The squad of soldiers, with the provost guard, whose authority ended at the city wall, was replaced by a squad of the Duke's guards. They and the Duke accompanied the cart through the mire and its resident criminals, and up the long road to Winding Circle. By then, Briar and Deja were asleep, as Triss pretended to be. Sandry climbed up to sit beside Rosethorn to admire the view of the harbor island lit by the 2 great lighthouses that guarded Summersea's port. Once they were well past the mire, the Duke got Rosethorn's attention. May I drive for a time? He asked. Even if you're not accustomed to riding, you'll find Lady Love a comfortable mount. Briar opened a sleepy eye when Rosethorn laughed and accepted the offer. As calmly as if he drove carts for a living, the Duke settled into her place and took up the reins. I hope I didn't put you on the spot back in the market, Sandry remarked quietly. I didn't think you would favor me just because you're my great-uncle. Unnoticed by Sandry or the Duke, Briar sat up, furious. Her uncle? Wasn't that a bag for you? Of course she would be brave enough to stand up for them. She must have known he wouldn't punish her. Nor did I favor you. The Duke put his arm around Sandry. I would have delivered the same judgment had total strangers been involved. If he heard Briar's unbelieving snort, he ignored it. I would like to say now that your father and mother would have been proud of you. She ducked her head, glad that the darkness hid her blush. Truly? Truly. I am proud of you in their place. For the moment, they listened to the footsteps of the horses and soldiers and the distant boom of the sea. When Vedris took his arm away, Sandry asked, "Did you know, Uncle, about the magic?" For a moment, she thought he would not answer. Then she heard his velvet soft voice. "Your parents lived in such an odd way. I must believe it never occurred to them that new oddities might have their child at its source. Your own life with them was one oddity after another. What did you have to compare it to?" She yawned. "It complicates things, doesn't it?" Though it was too dark to see his face, she heard a smile in his voice. "My dear Sandrine, you have a talent for—" "I'm gonna be sick," Triss interrupted, voice high. She lurched to her feet, gripping the sides of the cart. Briar steadied her. "Triss?" Nico urged his mount over to her. "What is it?" A wave! There's a wave in the ground!" she gasped, eyes wide. "Tide's coming in!" "Impossible!" The Duke halted the cart. "My dear, you're dreaming." "I feel dizzy," Sandry whispered. The pup whined, then barked frantically. Deja awoke. The cart was shuddering. Lark sat up, pushing her hair out of her eyes. "Are we on a boat?" she asked the dedicate sleepily. The guards before and behind them lurched, barely keeping their feet. A handful of small rocks tumbled across the road as it shivered and went still. "Earthquake summer," whispered a soldier. "No earthquakes for me." Triss wiped her sweaty face. "I've had enough fun so far. Thanks all the same." Briar released her as some of the guards laughed nervously. "You feel any more such waves coming, Missy, you let us know," their sergeant directed Triss. "We'll appreciate it." Once they reached Winding Circle, they parted company with the Duke and his guardsmen. Seeing that Nico was about to ride on to help Lark as she took cart and mule back to the temple stables, Triss muttered, "I wish I could talk to him." Sandry heard. "Nico?" she called. "Might we, the four of us and you, have a word?" "Can't it wait until tomorrow?" he asked. "Now's better," said Deja firmly. "Time to face the music," Lark told Nico with a grin. He shrugged and dismounted. "I believe I'll take your horse to the stables," volunteered Rosethorn, "since you're staying here with the kids." "Coward," Nico told her. He walked into the cottage and the children followed, Little Bear trotting in the center of their group. Inside, Nico called up magical light to fill the main room. "You have something to say to me?" he asked, sitting on a chair. "Why didn't you tell us?" Triss's voice was harsh with tiredness and emotion. "If you'd even hinted, you, my dear, were adamant that you had no magic. I think that it was the only way that you could bear your family turning you out, if you thought there was something dreadful and alien that was wrong with you." In the even glow of the light, Nico's eyes were like black gems. "I feared that if you learned the truth too soon, you would reject it and keep rejecting it." "What about me?" Deja asked. "And Sandry and Briar? Nobody told us either." Nico sighed. "All four of you have endured a very difficult year, in one way or another. My reasoning was the same as it was for Triss. I preferred that you grow into knowing your power, instead of having it thrust on you to keep from damaging your spirits any more than they've already been. Were you all that surprised to hear it today?" "Yes," growled Briar. Deja looked at her hands and remembered Kirill telling Frostpine, "You're a great mage, perhaps the greatest smith mage in the world." "Why didn't other people know?" she asked. "Why didn't the Minimanders pick me out?" Why didn't that magic tester know? Asked Triss. She sank to the floor and gathered the puppy into her lap. He was supposed to be the best in all Captain. I think I understand a little. We don't do things like normal mages, do we? Sandry inquired. None of us made our toys move when we were small, I bet, or made pictures for people to see in the fire, or made things glow. She looked at the others as she said it, trying to see the answers in their faces. Those are the usual mage-born things. I never did any of them. Briar shook his head. We're tested for it when we turned 4, murmured Deja. They found no magic in me. It isn't their faults, Nico said crisply. Even I had to look very deeply to see the power that's in each of you, and my specialty is finding things and people that are hidden. That's why I brought you here instead of to the university. There are more mages in Winding Circle whose power speaks through workaday things, plain things, as yours does. So, our power isn't that big or important, grumbled Triss. Nico sighed. It is greater than you think. There is weather or threadcraft, he pointed to Sandry, or metalwork or growing plants. He pointed to Deja and Briar in turn. Everything in the world. People cannot live without any of those things. They may not like it, but they can live without the products of traditional magery, such as love potions and seeing the future. Kirill said Frostpine might be the greatest smith mage in the world, Deja said. That sounds important to me. It is, and Frostpine has searched for 20 long years for a student who shares his gift, replied Nico. Any more questions? The 4 were silent. The long day had caught up with them, and suddenly no magic in the world seemed as good to them as their own beds. Then I will see you in the morning. Nico levered himself to his feet. It's time for you to get to work, now that you know what we're dealing with. Okay. So that finished chapters 9 and 10. I like that we're kind of getting more into the meat of it. I'm a little bit disappointed that it's coming basically at the end of the book. But you know, I still like that we're getting more information. And you know, I know that this is just the first book, so a lot of this first book is going to be a lot of slice of life stuff, so I appreciate that. Anyway, I hope you guys have had as much fun listening to me as I have had reading to you. It is a little bit late here. It's probably almost 10 o'clock, and I have to work in the morning. So, as much as I would love to sit here and gab at you some more, I simply can't. I have to go. Anyway, I hope you guys have a fantastic new year. I hope that we get all the things that we need and or want in the world. And that things are just simply awesome. You guys have a good one. See y'all later. Bye.